papers, and then every parliamentary day would get makeup professionally done. Tim would do my hair, but get makeup professionally done, which all sounds very luxurious and indulgent until you have to do it every day, and then it's not luxurious and indulgent anymore. And then I would get into Parliament and have my first meeting with Wayne and Albo to set up our tactics for the day, which had a pretty familiar format, papers are crap. Yep, they are, Wayne. Polls are crap. Yep, that's true too. Yep. Right, what do you reckon we're going to do today? And then we would get stuck into planning for question time. And then in that time in between that first meeting and going to question time, you might just be on internal meetings and internal paperwork, but some days just remarkable things would happen, and you'd get the opportunity, as I did, to apologise for the nation to people who had been the victims of forced adoptions and to participate in that moment. Then whatever else was happening in Parliament that day, I'd get on an adrenaline-fuelled surge between 12 and 2 to get ready for question time.
What would you do? You wouldn't get on your bike and ride up Red Hill, would you?
No.
So what would you do to gee yourself up?
Happily leave that to Mr Abbott as his pre-question time routine. The staff would have spent a lot of time working out what was in the newspapers. Fortunately, the opposition was pretty predictable, and so what they were going to ask would come out of the newspapers, and so you'd get all of those bad stories from the morning, and then they'd go and get the answers for them, and they would be in my question time folder, and so you'd have to get across all of that and memorise it by question time. Then you'd go and do...
That's all.
You'd go and do that for the hour and a bit that it took, and then a lot of my time was devoted to parliamentary business because of the minority parliament. I actually had to have the Prime Minister's office rewired so that the division bells rang in the Prime Minister's office, because before that they didn't, because there was just no expectation the Prime Minister was going to waste his time going to a division. But I couldn't afford to miss a division because we, lose a bill, we'd lose government. So, I had to rewire it. So negotiations with the independents, making sure that the parliamentary processes were working, took a lot of time. You have a lot of evening functions in Parliament. I mean, all the great and the good and the various lobby groups and causes come to Parliament and have their annual events. Some of them are a grand delight. Some you're kind of sneaking a look at the watch and hoping you might be able to, get an early night. Whether or not I could get an early night depended on whether or not Mr Abbott had something on and we could pair and both leave Parliament. Otherwise, I would be there until the Parliament ceased to sit, which some nights could be very late indeed.
At 1 o'clock in the morning?
Yes, sometimes when we were pushing stuff through at the end of sessions.
I've got to speed things up a bit. I'm looking at the clock. But on the night of that wonderful speech you gave on June 26, you nominated as your legacy, the things that you were proudest of, you nominated health reform, a price on carbon, disability care, education reform, the Royal Commission into child sexual abuse, and foreign policy. You nominated the strengthened alliances between the United States and China, and also the developing relationship with India. What of these things, or of anything else in your legacy that you want to tell us about, what was the hardest to achieve?
I think the hardest to achieve was the new architecture with China.
Really?
Not in the sense...
And what do you mean by architecture?
Yeah, sorry, I should be clearer than that. We have secured, and we are one of the few nations on earth that now has a standing commitment that the Australian leader and Chinese leader will meet once a year, and that is very, very significant for us. It took a more than 12-month strategy, piece by piece, officials working. Wayne actually played a role in a visit to China. Of course, the Foreign Minister, Bob Carr, did too. And it ultimately had to be sealed in a phone call between me and the Premier to make enough space so that when I got to China there would be no doubt that we would be able to get this done. So it was a lot of patient effort, but I was very proud of it.
And you said when you took over the job of Prime Minister that foreign policy wasn't your thing. Well, that changed pretty quickly, didn't it? It turned out to be you were quite good at it.
Yeah, look, I made a statement that, I'll always feel more comfortable in a classroom mucking around with kids. And, that was my way of saying the thing that brought me into politics was education and opportunity and not foreign policy. Not that I wasn't interested in our world. Of course I was interested in our world, but it wasn't the thing that propelled me into politics. But for all of its difficulties and, foreign policy, incredibly complex, and for all of the machinery that goes around at the Department of Foreign Affairs and everything else that supports a Prime Minister, it actually comes down to, two people in a moment, often across cultures. Can you find a way of relating to each other in a meaningful way as human beings, or are you going to sit there and read through the talking points that an official has given you? And so for a lot of it, it is, find a way to have a joke, find a way to create a connection so that you can, move beyond, gee, you're my 20th meeting today, to actually, this is a human being I'm going to respond to.
You obviously achieved that in spades, as it were, with Barack Obama.
Well,
you and he clearly got on so well. You joked, you laughed, you had your arms around each other in photographs. You played football, and all of us watching you play football in the Oval Office. Oh my God! If that breaks one of those amazingly valuable.
It could have gone badly.
Yes.
Well, actually, the whole relationship could have gone badly because the first time we met each other, which was just in a casual encounter in a multilateral meeting. So not a formal bilateral where you're sitting down with all of the officials and all the rest of it. And he said to me, I really envy, I can't do the American accent, I won't even try. I really envy your question time, to which I said instantaneously, are you mad? And then the second it was out of my mouth went, boy, that was kind of a really dumb thing to say to the leader of the free world on first meeting. Fortunately, he laughed, and I explained to him, question time, it's like, an hour and a bit, 4 days a week, and Parliament sits 20 weeks a year, and you take 10 questions, and basically I take all of them, and people are screaming abuse at you as you're answering them, to which he had the good grace at the end of the conversation to go, I am mad. No, that just sounds, that sounds dreadful.
The other person in the American administration that you had a very good relationship with, of course, was Hillary Clinton, and you and she have had a number of meetings, and I think you saw her last week in New York. I know we're running out of time. We have to go to audience questions in a second, but can I just quickly ask you, do you want her to run?
Look, I said to you when we spoke for what became my last interview as Prime Minister, I wasn't sure what to wish for her. And I, in part, thought that because as I had seen her towards the end of her Secretary of State period, she looked so physically exhausted. And what really made me think that, and it's going to sound like a little thing, but I thought it was emblematic, whenever you see a photograph of her as a teenager, as a young woman, she's got the headband and the hair pulled back. And as in her last period of Secretary of State, she'd turn up to meetings and she'd have the headband and the hair pulled back. And just, when you're that tired, I know, you just go back to the things that you know and are most comfortable with, and it really is
so
speaking of a... well, I ended up, if you could get a morning where you could, pad round and just take a little bit more time and have an extra cup of coffee, I would do that. But I thought that said how deeply exhausted she was, and that's why I said to you I wasn't sure what to wish for her. But having seen her in New York, she looks terrific, she looks vibrant, she looks bright-eyed, she's full of ideas about politics, about our world, and very focused on empowerment for women and girls. And wouldn't it be fantastic to follow the first African American president with the first woman president? And
we're going to go to audience questions in a moment, so anybody who'd like to ask a question, please make your way to the microphones. And I'm going to ask Julia one final question while you're doing that. And that is, Julia Gillard, what's next? You've already announced that you're moving your office to the University of Adelaide. You'll be the first Prime Minister to have an office in the university, which embodies your commitment to education. You've announced that you're going to be writing a book, writing your memoir. I'm sure we're all looking forward to that. Maybe we can come back and talk about that next year. Do you have anything else in store?
Yes, I do. So Tim and I and Ruben in round about mid-November will be moving to Adelaide. I'll take up the honorary professorship at Adelaide University. But I have just entered an arrangement with Brookings, which is one of the world's leading think tanks in Washington, to be a senior fellow working on global education issues.
I was going to ask you what does that entail, but it seems everybody already knows. And given the number of people who are lined up at the...
It does mean I'll get to live in Adelaide, but I will be travelling to Washington very regularly.
A lot.
A lot.
Okay. So Katrina is going to now manage the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have clearly some cues on either side of the hall tonight, and unfortunately we won't be able to perhaps get to all of your questions, so we've got half an hour, and what I'll do is just ask you if you could please let us know your first name and where you're from, and then address the question to Julia. That'd be fabulous. So we'll start down here.
Well, good evening, Anne and Julia. My name is Nicola, and I'm from the Women's College at the University of Sydney. My question is this. Tony Abbott is the new Minister for Women. What advice do you have for him?
I think the advice I would have for Prime Minister Abbott is to reach across the partisan divide and ask Tanya.
Okay, and the next question, please.
Lance from Erskineville. Julia, those handwritten notes you kept for the misogyny speech, can I have them?